When people think of strength, they imagine loud voices, attention-seeking actions, or dramatic displays. But the truth, and the one I lived by, is that real power doesn't announce itself in noise. It moves in silence. When I was building myself, I didn't wait for applause, and I didn't need validation from anyone. My strength was born in quiet hours of relentless practice, when no one was watching. If you want to become someone the world cannot ignore, you must learn the art of building yourself quietly. It is a process of discipline, patience, and resilience, one that will make you unshakable. Let me speak to you directly and share with you 6 silent ways to transform yourself into a force so strong that the world has no choice but to take notice. 1. Master the discipline of daily practice. Discipline is not a performance that you put on for the world to see. It is not about flexing in front of others, and it is not about impressing people with how hard you appear to work. Discipline is something much deeper. It is the invisible power that you repeat in silence when no one claps for you, when no one notices, and when there is no reward waiting at the end of the day except the satisfaction that you stayed true to your path. I know this because my journey was built on it. I trained until my muscles ached, until my bones felt heavy, and until sweat poured off my body like rain, not because a teacher was watching me, not because a crowd was cheering for me, but because I demanded it of myself. I understood that greatness is not given. It is forged through repetition that seems endless and boring to the average person. Every punch I threw, every kick I practiced, every stance I held had to be repeated until it no longer felt like a technique but became part of my very being. This kind of practice is not glamorous. There is no audience to admire it. There is no applause. It is just you, the sound of your breath growing heavier, the rhythm of your heart pounding against your chest, and the voice inside you that whispers, "Again." That is where real power is born. In the silence of repetition, in the quiet hours when you push yourself further than yesterday. You see, many people waste time waiting for inspiration, waiting for motivation, waiting for the perfect moment to begin. But discipline doesn't wait. Discipline says, I will do it whether I feel like it or not. That is what separates those who wish from those who achieve. If you can train yourself to practice every single day, not just when it is convenient, but also when you are tired, when you are discouraged, and when you feel no one is watching, then you begin to carve yourself into something extraordinary. Discipline turns your effort into habit, habit into skill, and skill into mastery. Others will talk, others will procrastinate, others will wait for applause before they act. But you, if you choose to live with quiet discipline, you will sharpen your craft day by day until it cuts sharper than any blade. And when that sharpness is revealed to the world, it will be impossible for them to ignore you. That is the gift of discipline. It builds you quietly, but when the results emerge, they speak so loudly that no one can deny what you have become. 2. Build your mind before you build your muscles. When people look at me, they often talk about my speed, my strength, or my body. But what they don't always realize is that the body you see was guided by the mind you don't. Physical power without mental power is like a sword without a hand to wield it. Muscles may impress for a moment, but wisdom directs them, and without direction, strength is wasted. I spent countless hours reading, studying, and reflecting. I didn't limit myself only to martial arts. I studied philosophy, psychology, history, and even poetry. Why? Because I knew that if I wanted to be truly unstoppable, I had to develop my mind just as fiercely as I trained my body. The body is a tool, but the mind is the master that tells the tool how to act. Many people make the mistake of thinking that success is only about physical training, about lifting weights, or about looking strong on the outside. They pour all their energy into building a body that others can see, but forget to build the inner power that guides every action. Muscles can fade, strength can weaken, but knowledge, perspective, clarity of thought, and self-awareness are powers that never leave you once they are earned. When I practiced martial arts, I wasn't just memorizing movements, I was also asking myself, why this movement? Why does it work? What does it teach about balance, flow, and timing? Every time I asked those questions, my mind became sharper, and that sharpness made my body even more effective. When you dedicate yourself to building your mind, you start to see things differently. You begin to recognize patterns where others see only confusion. You learn to stay calm when others panic, to think clearly when others get lost in emotion. This is why a strong mind is more dangerous than a strong fist. A punch without thought is just force, but a punch guided by wisdom is precision. And precision, when combined with discipline, becomes something no one can stop. The process of building your mind is not dramatic. You do not need to tell the world how many books you have read or how much you are learning. Knowledge works silently inside you. You feed it daily, little by little, like adding drops of water to a pot. Over time, it fills until it overflows, and people begin to notice not because you said you were wise, but because your presence shows wisdom. They will see it in the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, and the way you handle challenges. So remember this truth: before you build the body, build the mind, because a strong mind will always create a strong body. But a strong body without a strong mind will eventually collapse. If you quietly invest in sharpening your thinking, in questioning, in reflecting, and in seeking knowledge, you will carry within you a strength that no one can take away. And when the time comes to reveal it, the world will not just see your muscles, they will feel the depth of your mind guiding every move you make. 3. Protect your energy from noise. In this life, there will always be noise. People talking, people judging, people doubting, people trying to pull you into their chaos. If you allow every opinion, every distraction, and every piece of negativity to enter your mind, you will never have the strength to build yourself. I learned very early that energy is the most valuable resource you have, and once it is wasted, it cannot be recovered. That is why I became very careful about where I placed my energy. I refused to argue with small minds. I refused to fight battles that didn't matter. I refused to spend hours trying to prove myself to people who would never understand. Instead, I took all that energy and redirected it toward my training, my philosophy, my art, and my vision. You see, most people waste their lives trying to defend themselves from critics. They waste time replying to every insult, explaining themselves to people who don't deserve explanations, or trying to be liked by everyone. But you cannot please the world, and you cannot silence every critic. If you try, you will drain yourself dry before you ever reach your potential. I chose silence. When someone doubted me, I didn't argue. I trained harder. When someone mocked me, I didn't waste breath defending myself. I let my results speak when the time came. When the world tried to distract me, I retreated into focus. That is how I protected my energy. Noise is dangerous because it looks harmless. Gossip, criticism, and distraction seem small, but they steal hours from your life. They steal clarity from your mind, and they steal fire from your spirit. Protecting your energy means setting boundaries. It means deciding what truly matters and ruthlessly cutting away what does not. It means having the strength to walk away from meaningless debates and instead pour yourself into growth. Every moment you waste on noise is a moment you could have spent building the life you want. Think of energy as the fuel that drives your entire existence. If you pour that fuel into meaningless fires, you will run out before you ever reach your destination. But if you guard it, if you store it carefully and release it only into what matters, your discipline, your vision, your training, your creation, you will become unstoppable. People may not understand at first. They may think you are cold or too quiet or too focused. But later, when they see what you have built, they will realize that it was your silence, your discipline, and your protection of energy that made you strong. I cannot emphasize this enough. You do not need to answer every critic. You do not need to respond to every distraction. Let your silence be your answer. Let your growth be your defense. Let your results be your voice. Protect your energy as if it is life itself, because in truth, it is. Without energy, you cannot grow, you cannot create, you cannot achieve. But with energy preserved, focused, and directed, you can transform yourself into a force the world cannot ignore. 4. Build results, not explanations. The world is filled with people who talk, with people who explain, with people who constantly announce what they are going to do one day. They spend their energy convincing others with words, but when the time comes to act, they fall short. I never believed in telling people my plans because words can be empty, words can fool others, and sometimes they even fool ourselves into believing we are making progress when we are not. I learned that results are the only true language of strength. When you produce results, you do not need to explain yourself, you do not need to defend yourself, and you do not need to beg for respect. The results speak so loudly that no voice can silence them. When I was young, I did not go around telling people, one day I will be fast, one day I will be strong, one day I will be great. Instead, I worked in silence. I trained until my kicks cut through the air like blades, until my punches could snap through boards, until my body moved faster than the eye could follow. Then, when I finally stepped into demonstrations, when I finally appeared before others, my results left no room for debate. People could doubt my words, but they could not doubt the speed of my strike or the strength of my body. That is the power of results. They silence the critics, they destroy the doubts, and they prove what no amount of talking ever could. Explanations are often excuses dressed in clever language. Have you noticed how people justify why they didn't succeed? They say, I was too busy, or I didn't have enough support, or I'll do it later. These are explanations that comfort the weak but change nothing in reality. The truth is, the world does not care for excuses. The world responds only to what you produce. If you spend your time explaining instead of working, you are wasting the very energy that could have built results strong enough to answer every question. When you choose to build results, you learn to live differently. You no longer measure your progress by how much you say, but by how much you do. You no longer seek validation from others because the work itself becomes your proof. And this approach is not just about martial arts or physical training. It applies to every part of life. Whether it is building your career, your character, your relationships, or your art, results are the true measure of progress. Quietly doing the work day after day until the results are undeniable is the most powerful form of communication. Understand this, results create authority. When people see what you have built, when they witness the transformation of your body, your skill, your character, or your success, they will listen. They may not like you, they may not support you, but they cannot ignore what you have achieved. That is why I always said, don't tell me, show me. Talking about your goals will not impress me, but living them, becoming them, achieving them, that is something the world must respect, whether they want to or not. So stop announcing every step. Stop wasting breath trying to convince people of your worth. Stop waiting for approval before you act. Work in silence. Train when nobody knows. Build when nobody sees. And then, when your results stand before the world, they will speak so loudly that you won't need to explain a thing. Results are louder than words, and when you dedicate yourself to them, you will become someone the world cannot look away from. 5. Embrace the pain of solitude. Many people fear being alone. They run from silence, they drown themselves in noise, and they surround themselves with distractions because they cannot stand the weight of solitude. But I discovered that solitude is not something to fear. It is a hidden teacher, a mirror that shows you who you really are. Some of the most important battles of my life were fought not in the ring, not in front of a crowd, but in the silence of an empty room, when it was just me, my body, my thoughts, and the determination to go further than yesterday. That silence was not always comfortable. In fact, solitude can be painful. It exposes your weaknesses, your fears, your doubts. It forces you to confront yourself without escape. Yet it is in this very pain that growth is forged. When I trained alone, there was no applause, no encouragement, and no recognition. There was only the burning in my muscles, the sting of sweat in my eyes, and the sound of my breath echoing against the walls. At times, it felt lonely, but I knew those hours of isolation were shaping me into something the world would one day recognize. Every movement I repeated, every idea I refined, every technique I sharpened in solitude became a foundation for the person people later admired. What the world saw was only the surface, the movies, the demonstrations, the speed. What they did not see were the nights I stayed up, pushing my body to exhaustion, the mornings I rose before anyone else to practice, and the countless hours of reflection where I questioned myself, corrected myself, and rebuilt myself in silence. Most people are afraid of solitude because it strips away the illusion of constant validation. But here is the truth. Greatness cannot grow under the eyes of the crowd. It grows in hidden soil, watered by discipline and patience. Solitude gives you space to think clearly without the noise of others. It teaches you to rely on your own strength instead of depending on applause or approval. It shows you whether your motivation is real or if it exists only when others are watching. In solitude, you cannot hide from yourself. And though that is uncomfortable, it is also liberating because once you conquer yourself in silence, no outside force can break you. Embracing solitude also trains you to focus. When you are alone, you learn to cut away distractions and pour yourself completely into the task at hand. I used solitude to experiment, to try new movements, to develop new philosophies of combat and life. Without distraction, creativity flows. Without interruption, breakthroughs happen. The greatest ideas, the deepest insights, and the sharpest skills are often born when you are away from the world, when the only companion you have is silence itself. But remember, solitude is not about escaping people or hating the world. It is about retreating into yourself long enough to gather strength, to sharpen your edge, and to return even stronger. Just as a sword must spend time in the fire before it shines, you must spend time in solitude before your greatness can be revealed. People will not see the hours you spend alone. They will not feel the pain of your discipline or the weight of your silence. But they will see the strength, the mastery, and the calm power you carry out of it. So do not run from solitude, embrace it. Let it refine you, let it challenge you, let it strip away what is weak, so that what remains is unshakable. In those lonely hours, you are not wasting time, you are investing in your future. And when the world finally sees what you have built in the shadows, they will understand that the pain of solitude was the foundation of your unstoppable power. 6. Let your character be louder than your voice. In the end, when the training is done, when the sweat has dried, and when the world looks at you, what remains is not only your skill, not only your body, not only your achievements. What remains is your character. Skills may earn you attention for a moment, but character is what makes people remember you long after you are gone. I always believed that the most powerful force a person can carry is not in their fists, not in their muscles, but in the way they live, in the choices they make when nobody is watching, and in the respect they give to others even when there is nothing to gain. I could break boards, I could move faster than the eye could follow, but if my heart was arrogant, if my words were disrespectful, if my actions were unbalanced, then all my power would mean nothing. That is why I made sure that humility walked side by side with strength. I trained not only to fight, but to discipline my mind, to control my ego, to carry myself with respect. True power is not in domination, but in self-control. It is easy to shout, to boast, to demand attention, but that is weakness disguised as strength. Real strength moves quietly, with dignity, with restraint, and with confidence that does not need to announce itself. When you build your character in silence, you are shaping the invisible foundation of your life. People may not notice at first, because character is not loud, but slowly it reveals itself. They see it in how you react under pressure, in how you treat others, in how you keep your word, in how you remain calm when others lose control. I have always said, knowledge will give you power, but character respect. And respect is more lasting than fear, more powerful than fame, and more valuable than applause. Character is tested not in the easy moments, but in the difficult ones. When people criticize you, do you lash out or do you stand with calm? When success tempts you with arrogance, do you remain grounded or do you let your pride destroy you? When no one is watching, do you still live by your principles or do you abandon them in secret? These silent choices, repeated day after day, shape a character so strong that it cannot be ignored. The world is full of talented people who never earned respect because their character was weak. Do not make that mistake. Build yourself in such a way that even your enemies cannot deny the integrity you carry. Understand this clearly. Your voice may fade, your looks may change, your body may weaken with time, but character remains. It outlives applause, it outshines skill, it survives failure, and it gives you strength even in moments of weakness. A person with unshakable character becomes like a mountain, silent, steady, immovable. They do not need to shout, they do not need to explain, because their presence itself speaks for them. That is the power of building your life on integrity, humility, and respect. So let your character be louder than your voice. Let the way you live, the way you act, the way you treat others, and the way you stand for your principles be the message that cannot be ignored. If you build your skills without character, your success will be shallow and short-lived. But if you build your character alongside your skills, then you will not only be powerful, you will be unforgettable. And when your time comes, the world will remember you not just as someone who was strong, but as someone who lived with honor. 7. Become water, the silent force that shapes everything. There is a lesson I carried with me all my life, a principle that I taught again and again, because it was not only philosophy, it was my way of living. I said, "Be water, my friend." Many people repeat these words, but few understand the depth behind them. Water is silent. It does not shout. It does not announce its power. Yet water is one of the most unstoppable forces in existence. It can flow softly, nourishing and refreshing, or it can crash with unimaginable strength, carving mountains, breaking rocks, shaping landscapes over centuries. And it does all of this quietly, without asking for attention, without needing applause. To build yourself into someone the world cannot ignore, you must become like water. What does it mean to be water? It means to adapt. When you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. When you pour it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. In the same way, life will throw you into many situations. Sometimes you will face opportunities, sometimes obstacles, sometimes moments of stillness, sometimes storms of chaos. If you are rigid, if you refuse to bend, life will break you. But if you are like water, you can adapt to every circumstance without losing your essence. You remain yourself, yet you flow around obstacles, you seep through cracks, you reshape yourself according to the situation, and in the process, you outlast everything that resists you. I lived this truth in my own journey. When I first came to America, I faced rejection. Hollywood told me that an Asian man could not be the hero, that the world was not ready to see someone like me in the spotlight. If I had been rigid, if I had accepted their refusal, I would have been broken. But I chose to be water. I adapted. I created my own path. I taught martial arts. I opened schools. I developed my own style. And I built such undeniable influence that Hollywood had no choice but to pay attention. That is the lesson. If you are water, rejection cannot stop you, because you flow around it, you find another way, and eventually you carve your own path through the stone of resistance. Water also teaches patience. A single drop seems weak, but when drops fall for years, they wear down the hardest rock. In the same way, your daily discipline, your small efforts, your consistent actions may not seem powerful in the moment, but over time, they will transform you into someone extraordinary. The crowd looks for dramatic victories, but true greatness is not built in a day. It is carved through quiet persistence, just as rivers carve valleys and waterfalls shape cliffs. People may not notice your progress at first. They may even laugh at your efforts. But one day they will see the results of your persistence, and it will be undeniable, just as no one can deny the power of a canyon carved by water over thousands of years. Another truth of water is that it never resists its own nature. It does not struggle to be fire or air or earth. It simply flows as water. In the same way, you must discover your true self and embrace it fully. Too many people live trying to be someone else, imitating others, chasing trends, or forcing themselves into molds that do not fit them. That is why they are never at peace, and why their power fades quickly. But when you live like water, authentic, true to your essence, you move naturally and your strength flows without effort. In martial arts, this was my greatest principle. I refused to copy blindly. I took what was useful, discarded what was not, and added what was uniquely my own. That is water. That is authenticity. And authenticity is what makes you unforgettable. Water also teaches humility. Despite its power, water always seeks the lowest point. It flows downward, never upward, humbling itself before rising again as clouds, as rain, as rivers. In life, the greatest people are not those who shout from the highest peaks, but those who remain humble, grounded, and respectful. When you carry yourself like water, soft, calm, humble, you may seem gentle, but inside you carry unstoppable strength. Humility does not make you weak. It makes you limitless, because the humble never stop learning, never stop adapting, never stop flowing forward. In combat, I lived by this principle every moment. To fight like water means to stay fluid. If my opponent strikes high, I flow low. If he blocks, I slip around him. If he is rigid, I wait until he breaks. Water has no fixed form, and so it cannot be trapped. That is the secret. If you are rigid, the world can predict you, control you, break you. But if you are fluid, if you are water, no one can stop you. You move where you must, you adapt when needed, and you strike with the timing of a wave that no wall can withstand. But being water is not only about combat, it is about life itself. Life will test you, disappoint you, push you down, and try to contain you in boxes too small for your spirit. You must remember, water cannot be contained forever. Even when blocked, it finds a way. It seeps through cracks. It rises as vapor. It returns as rain. It flows again. This is why, no matter how many times I was rejected, no matter how many barriers were placed in front of me, I kept flowing. My silence was my strength. My adaptability was my weapon. My persistence was my victory. If you want to build yourself into someone the world cannot ignore, learn from water, flow quietly but with purpose, adapt without losing yourself, persist until even the hardest obstacles give way, stay humble but carry hidden strength. Do not waste your energy fighting every wall. Instead, flow around them until your quiet persistence erodes them to nothing. Let your life be like a river, silent yet powerful, patient yet unstoppable, humble yet impossible to ignore. When you become water, you no longer need to shout for attention. You no longer need to beg for recognition. Your presence itself speaks. Your results flow into the world and leave their mark. And just as rivers carve valleys, just as oceans shape continents, you will shape your destiny in silence until the world has no choice but to stand in awe of what you have become. 8. Endure the storms in silence. Life is not always calm waters and clear skies. If you live long enough, you will face storms, moments when everything seems to collapse, when the world feels against you, when the people you trusted walk away, and when your own heart feels too heavy to carry. I faced these storms in my own life. I faced rejection from the film industry that told me someone like me could never lead. I faced injuries that tested my body and spirit. I faced doubts, ridicule, and the weight of expectations. And yet, through every storm, I learned one thing. The strongest person is not the one who shouts the loudest in the chaos. but the one who endures in silence, who holds steady when the winds howl, and who refuses to break when life tries to bend them. Silence in a storm is not weakness, it is mastery. When everything crashes around you, your instinct may be to panic, to lash out, to explain yourself, or to scream for help. But storms are not defeated by noise. They are endured by patience, resilience, and calm focus. Imagine a tree in a typhoon. The branches whip and crack, the leaves are torn away, but the tree survives because its roots are deep and its trunk bends without breaking. Be like that tree. Bend if you must, shed what you must, but remain rooted. Endure quietly, because when the storm passes, you will still be standing, and the world will look at you with respect that cannot be bought with words. I remember when I injured my back, an injury that doctors told me might prevent me from ever practicing martial arts again. In that moment, the storm was fierce. My body felt broken, my future seemed uncertain, and the voices of doubt grew louder around me. But instead of giving in to despair, I embraced the silence. I used that time to study, to write, to strengthen my philosophy. I redirected my energy into my mind, because if my body was weak, my mind could still grow strong. That season of storm became the very soil in which my philosophy took root. Out of pain grew wisdom, and out of silence came a strength that shaped me more than any victory in the arena ever could. This is what I want you to understand. Storms are not punishments. They are teachers. They strip away your illusions, they test your patience, and they expose your true strength. Most people panic in storms. They complain, they explain, they beg for others to rescue them. But when you endure in silence, when you face the storm without losing yourself, you discover that you are far stronger than you ever believed. Your spirit deepens, your perspective widens, and your will hardens into something unbreakable. Enduring storms also teaches humility. You realize that you cannot control everything. You cannot stop the rain, you cannot silence the thunder, you cannot command the winds. But what you can control is your response. You can choose to remain calm, to breathe, to anchor yourself in discipline, and to keep moving forward one step at a time. The storm may roar, but it cannot dictate your spirit unless you allow it to. And when you learn this truth, storms lose their power to terrify you. You no longer fear them, because you know you have endured before and you will endure again. Silence in the storm also builds credibility. The world watches how you handle difficulty. Anyone can smile in the sunshine, but few can remain steady in the storm. When people see that you do not break, that you do not collapse, that you do not lose your dignity even when life is harsh, they cannot help but respect you. They may not say it aloud, but in their hearts they will know, here is someone who is not ordinary. Here is someone who has endured what others could not. Here is someone who cannot be ignored. Do not mistake silence for passivity. Silence is not sitting back and doing nothing. Silence is active. It is the art of focusing all your energy inward, of redirecting your strength to where it matters, of refusing to waste your spirit on panic or noise. When I endured storms, I was never idle. Even when my body was hurt, my mind was training. Even when I was rejected, my spirit was creating. Silence gave me space to adapt, to plan, to grow. While others wasted energy in fear, I invested energy in preparation. That is why, when the storm cleared, I was ready to rise stronger than before. Life will test you in ways you cannot predict. It may take away your comfort, your certainty, even your health. But remember this, storms do not last forever. They rage, they roar, and then they pass. And when they pass, only two kinds of people remain, those who collapsed in fear and those who endured in silence. Be the one who endures. Be the one who stands when the winds stop. Be the one who transforms storms into stepping stones. When you endure storms in silence, you also inspire others without even trying. People may not know the details of your struggle, but they will see the calmness in your eyes, the steadiness in your steps, and the quiet strength in your character. And that silent example will speak louder than 1,000 speeches. without shouting, without demanding. You will show others what it means to be unshakable. So the next time life throws you into chaos, do not be afraid. Do not waste your energy screaming at the sky. Instead, breathe, stand firm, focus on what you can control, redirect your energy inward, let the storm pass through you without destroying you. And when it is over, step out of the silence with a strength so deep, so undeniable, that the world cannot help but notice. That is how storms become your training ground, and that is how silence in suffering becomes the loudest voice of all. Because the truth is simple. The world remembers those who endure, not the ones who panic, not the ones who make noise, but the ones who survive storms with dignity, who rise again without bitterness, and who carry a calm strength that no storm can take away. Endure in silence, and you will build yourself into someone they cannot ignore. 9. Conquer yourself before you conquer the world. Too many people live their lives trying to conquer the world while being slaves to themselves. They chase recognition, wealth, power, and status, but inside they are restless, undisciplined, and fragile. I tell you this with absolute clarity. The greatest battle you will ever face is not with an opponent, not with society, not with critics, and not even with the obstacles life places before you. The greatest battle you will ever fight is with yourself. If you cannot master your mind, your emotions, your impulses, and your inner fears, then all the victories you achieve on the outside will eventually crumble. But if you conquer yourself, if you master the hidden battlefield within, you will build a strength so unshakable that the world itself cannot ignore you. When I trained, I was not simply training to strike harder or move faster. I was training to discipline the restless energy inside me, to bring order to my thoughts, to control my fears, and to refine my spirit. Every punch, every kick, every repetition was not only shaping my body, but also sharpening my mind. Discipline in training is really discipline in life. If you can force yourself to practice when you are tired, if you can push through when your body wants to quit, if you can continue when your mind whispers excuses, then you are not just training muscles, you are training your will, and a trained will is more powerful than any weapon. But conquering yourself is not only about discipline, it is also about mastering your emotions. Anger, fear, pride, doubt, these are the enemies that live within us. They are silent assassins that rob us of focus, drain us of energy, and lead us to destroy ourselves before any outside enemy ever can. I learned that anger can blind you, fear can paralyze you, pride can make you arrogant, and doubt can make you weak. If you let these emotions control you, you will never find true power. The world will provoke you, insult you, and test you. If you react without control, you will lose yourself in their games. But if you conquer your emotions, if you remain calm while others rage, steady while others panic, and humble while others boast, then you gain an advantage that no one can take away. I saw this truth clearly in combat. The fighter who loses his temper is already defeated because his mind is no longer clear. The fighter who lets fear enter his heart moves too cautiously and misses his chance. The fighter who is arrogant underestimates his opponent and makes fatal mistakes. And the fighter who doubts himself never fully commits, always holding back, always hesitating. But the fighter who has conquered himself, who controls his emotions, who commands his mind, who trusts his training, he becomes untouchable. His strength flows without interruption, his movements are sharp, and his spirit is unshakable. That is why I always said, the true warrior is an average man with laser-like focus. Conquering yourself also means silencing the endless noise of comparison. Too many people waste their lives looking at what others are doing, chasing after someone else's path, or trying to live up to someone else's expectations. That is weakness. When you measure yourself against others, you lose sight of your own journey. The only comparison that matters is with the person you were yesterday. Did you grow? Did you improve? Did you sharpen your skill, strengthen your mind, deepen your character? That is the silent progress that builds unstoppable power. I did not care about being better than everyone else. I cared about being better than the man I was before. That is self-conquest. But understand this, conquering yourself is not a single victory. It is a lifetime of battles. Every day your laziness will try to rise. Every day your fears will whisper. Every day your ego will demand attention. And every day you must choose to fight back. Some days you will win, some days you may stumble. But if you keep rising, if you keep returning to the fight, you will grow stronger with every round. Just as a blacksmith shapes metal by striking it again and again, life will shape you through repeated tests. Do not run from them, embrace them. Every temptation resisted, every fear overcome, every impulse mastered is another step toward conquering yourself. I experienced this even in my career. Fame tempted me with arrogance. Success tempted me with comfort. Rejection tempted me with despair. Injury tempted me with weakness. But I remembered always, if I conquer myself, none of these things can defeat me. If I control my pride, fame cannot corrupt me. If I stay disciplined, success cannot make me soft. If I remain patient, rejection cannot destroy me. If I strengthen my spirit, injury cannot break me. The storms outside me only had power if I allowed the storms inside me to grow. Once I mastered myself, the outside world could not control me. This is the essence of true freedom. People think freedom is doing whatever you want. That is not freedom. That is slavery to impulse. Real freedom is the ability to choose your actions, to control your desires, to master your emotions, and to remain steady regardless of circumstance. A man who cannot control himself will always be controlled by others. But a man who has conquered himself cannot be manipulated, cannot be broken, and cannot be ignored. His power is silent but undeniable. Conquering yourself also gives you clarity of purpose. When the noise of doubt and emotion is silenced, you can see your path clearly. You are no longer distracted by what others are doing. You no longer chase empty recognition. You move with certainty because you know who you are and what you stand for. That clarity itself is power because most people are lost, chasing shadows, imitating others, or changing direction with every new trend. But the one who has conquered himself stands firm, unshakable, moving forward with focus that pierces through confusion like a blade through fog. So I tell you this, do not waste your life trying to conquer the world while being a stranger to yourself. Do not chase recognition while neglecting your discipline. Do not fight others while losing to your own impulses. Begin with yourself. Train your mind, discipline your body, control your emotions, silence your ego, defeat your doubts. That is the real battlefield. And when you win that battle, the world outside becomes easier to face because no obstacle is greater than the enemy within. If you can conquer yourself, you will not need to shout. You will not need to prove yourself with words. Your presence, your strength, your calm, and your discipline will speak louder than anything you say, and the world, whether it likes you or not, whether it agrees with you or not, will not be able to ignore you, for the one who has mastered himself has already won the greatest victory a human being can achieve. 10. Live with purpose, not for approval. Most people drift through life without truly knowing where they are going. They wake up, follow routines, chase what others tell them to chase, and measure themselves by how much applause they can collect. They think life is about being liked, about impressing others, about fitting into the mold society has built for them. But let me tell you the truth. Living for approval is the surest way to lose yourself. If you want to build a life that no one can ignore, if you want to rise beyond the ordinary, you must stop living for applause and begin living with purpose. Purpose is the silent fire that keeps you moving when no one is watching. Purpose is what gives meaning to discipline, to solitude, to every sacrifice you make. And purpose is what makes your life unshakable, even when storms come and critics speak. I learned this lesson early in my journey. When I pursued martial arts, people laughed at me. They said it was a waste of time. When I dreamed of breaking into Hollywood, they told me an Asian man could never be a star. If I had listened to their approval, I would have stopped before I even began. But I was not living for them. I was living for a purpose inside me, a purpose that told me to express myself honestly, through martial arts, through philosophy, through every movement of my body. That purpose was not something I needed to explain to everyone because it burned silently in my heart, and it was that fire that pushed me to keep going when doors were slammed in my face, when people doubted me, and when the road felt impossible. When you live for approval, you will always be a prisoner. And think about it. If your happiness depends on whether others clap for you, then you are controlled by them. If you succeed but they don't recognize it, you will feel empty. If you fail and they mock you, you will feel destroyed. That is slavery. Real freedom comes when you no longer need the approval of others to continue. When your actions are driven by purpose, not applause, you are unstoppable. Applause may come or it may not, but your fire keeps burning either way. That is how you build a life that lasts. Purpose gives you direction. Without it, you are like a ship tossed on waves, drifting wherever the wind takes you. With it, you are like an arrow, flying straight toward a target. Every step you take, every sacrifice you make, every silent hour of discipline has meaning because it is moving you closer to something greater. I was not simply training kicks and punches for the sake of movement. I was expressing a philosophy. I was creating an art form. I was building a way of life. That is why I could train for hours without boredom, because my training was not empty repetition, it was purpose in motion. Purpose also protects you from distraction. The world is full of noise, full of people telling you what you should be, what you should do, and how you should live. If you have no purpose, you will be pulled in every direction, constantly chasing approval, constantly trying to please everyone. But if you are anchored in purpose, you know what matters and what doesn't. You know which opportunities to accept and which to reject. You know how to protect your energy because you understand where it must be invested. And people will notice. They may not understand your silence, but they will feel your clarity, and clarity is magnetic. Living with purpose also gives you strength in suffering. Discipline is hard. Solitude can be painful. Rejection can crush the spirit. But if you know your purpose, you can endure. When I injured my back, I could have given up. Many told me to rest, to quit, to accept my limits. But my purpose would not allow me to stop. Even when my body was weak, I found strength in studying, writing, and shaping my philosophy. Because purpose does not vanish when circumstances change. It adapts, it endures, it grows. And in the end, it was that purpose that allowed me to rise again, stronger than before. But here is something most people forget. Purpose must be your own. It cannot be borrowed from others. It cannot be based on trends, on what is fashionable, or on what earns the loudest applause. I took what was useful from martial arts, I discarded what was not, and I added what was uniquely mine. That is purpose. It is personal. It comes from your deepest truth. When you live according to it, you no longer need to compete, because no one else can walk your path. And when you embody it fully, the world cannot ignore you, because they are not seeing an imitation. They are seeing something real, authentic, alive. Purpose also demands sacrifice. You cannot live for purpose and approval at the same time. Sometimes you will have to walk alone. Sometimes you will have to be misunderstood. Sometimes you will lose the applause of the crowd because the crowd does not understand vision. They only understand noise. But that is the price of living with depth. And in the end, when the applause fades and the noise disappears, it will not be the approval of others that gives you peace. It will be the knowledge that you live true to yourself. That is what makes a life meaningful. Think about those who lived only for recognition. Their fame fades, their names disappear, and their influence dies with them. But those who lived for purpose leave something behind that no storm can destroy. Purpose outlives applause. Purpose carries your voice beyond your time. Purpose gives meaning not only to your victories, but also to your struggles, because even your pain becomes part of your contribution. That is why I say, live with purpose. It will give your life a weight and a depth that applause never can. So stop asking, will they like me? Will they approve of me? Will they notice me? Ask instead, am I true to my purpose? Am I growing into who I was meant to be? Am I building something that matters? Approval fades, but purpose endures. Approval is noise, but purpose is silence that speaks louder than any applause. Approval makes you chase shadows, but purpose anchors you in light. If you live for approval, you may be noticed for a moment, but you will be forgotten just as quickly. If you live with purpose, you may not always be celebrated, but you will be remembered. People may not always clap for you, but they will not be able to ignore the life you lived. And in the end, that is far more powerful. So I leave you with this. Build your life around purpose, not applause. Train with purpose. Work with purpose. Love with purpose. Create with purpose. And when the world sees you, they will see not just another person chasing recognition, but someone who is unshakable, unstoppable, and unforgettable. For the one who lives with purpose carries a fire that no storm, no critic, and no rejection can extinguish. 11. Simplicity is the ultimate mastery. In a world that glorifies complexity, noise, and endless displays of skill, few realize that true mastery is not in adding more, but in stripping away the unnecessary until only the essence remains. I lived by this principle. I called it the art of simplicity. To me, simplicity was not emptiness. It was precision. It was focus. It was clarity. It was the ability to do one thing so purely, so directly, that it became unstoppable. Anyone can hide weakness behind complication. Anyone can distract with noise. But when you are simple, when your strike is straight, when your purpose is clear, when your life is uncluttered, there is nowhere to hide. Simplicity reveals truth, and truth is always powerful. I saw this in martial arts constantly. Many schools built systems that were heavy with rules, traditions, and complicated forms. They layered technique upon technique until the art became rigid and slow. But fighting is not rigid. Fighting is not a ceremony. Fighting is direct, fast, alive, and unpredictable. That is why I stripped away what was useless. I discarded techniques that wasted motion. I removed rituals that added nothing to effectiveness. I refused to cling to styles just because they were old. Instead, I focused on what worked, what was efficient, what was real. I called this way Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. It was not about collecting endless moves. It was about expressing truth through simplicity. Simplicity is not easy. In fact, it is harder than complexity because it requires you to cut away what you are attached to. It forces you to let go of the ego that wants to show off, the pride that wants to impress, and the fear that clings to the familiar. It requires courage to stand in front of the world and say, this is it, this one strike, this one principle, this one truth. But once you find that essence, it is unstoppable. A simple punch, perfected, is more dangerous than 1,000 fancy moves, half-learned. A simple life, focused, is more powerful than a complicated life, scattered in 1,000 directions. When you simplify, you gain clarity. You know what matters and what does not. You stop chasing every distraction. You stop trying to be everything for everyone. You stop filling your life with noise. Instead, you move directly toward your purpose. You practice fewer things, but you practice them deeply. You focus on fewer goals, but you chase them relentlessly. And that is what makes you impossible to ignore, because people are drawn to clarity. They are drawn to those who cut through confusion with a sharp, simple presence. Think of water again. Water is simple. It flows, it nourishes, it carves. It does not complicate itself, yet it is one of the most powerful forces on earth. The same is true for your life. The simpler your approach, the more focused your energy, the stronger your impact. Simplicity does not mean small, it means concentrated. And concentration, like a beam of light, can burn through anything. I carried this philosophy beyond martial arts. In acting, I did not try to overcomplicate my roles. I sought honesty. I sought authenticity. In teaching, I did not bury students under endless drills that had no meaning. I gave them principles, direct truths they could apply instantly. In life, I simplified my choices. I asked myself, does this serve my purpose or does it distract me from it? If it served, I kept it. If it distracted, I cut it away. This constant simplification freed my energy and made me sharper. You see, life is short. If you waste it chasing everything, you will accomplish nothing. But if you strip away the excess and focus on what truly matters, you will achieve more in silence than others achieve in noise. People will not always understand at first. They may think you are doing less, that you are too narrow, that you are missing out. But when your results appear, when they see the sharpness of your skill, the clarity of your mind, and the strength of your presence, they will realize that simplicity was the key all along. Simplicity is also honesty. It forces you to stop pretending. When you strip away the unnecessary, there is nothing to hide behind. The punch either works or it doesn't. The philosophy either stands or it falls. The life either has meaning or it does not. Simplicity exposes you, but it also frees you because once you stop pretending, you can begin truly living. You no longer waste energy on appearances. You no longer scatter yourself across 100 shallow pursuits. You live honestly, deeply, and directly. That honesty itself is magnetic. The world cannot ignore someone who is authentic in a world full of pretenders. And simplicity builds confidence. Complexity creates doubt. When you have 1,000 moves, you hesitate. Which one should I use? Which one is best? But when you have mastered simplicity, there is no hesitation. The punch comes naturally. The kick flows. The movement arises without thought. Simplicity makes you fast, not only in combat, but in life. Decisions become clear, actions become decisive. You stop hesitating, and you start living directly. That decisiveness makes you powerful in the eyes of others, because most people are trapped in hesitation, drowning in complexity, and lost in noise. This lesson, this principle of simplicity, is not just about martial arts or career, it is about your entire life. Look at your habits. Which ones truly serve you and which ones only waste your time? Look at your goals. Which ones are rooted in purpose and which ones are only chasing approval? Look at your relationships. Which ones build you and which ones drain you? Simplify. Strip away what does not serve. Cut down the noise until only what matters remains. Then pour yourself into that with everything you have. If you live simply, people will not always understand. They will say you are strange for refusing distractions or too serious for refusing to waste time. But when they see the sharpness of your results, when they see the power of your presence, when they see the impact of your focus, they will realize that you were never doing less. You were doing more, but in silence. And silence, when filled with purpose, speaks louder than any noise. So remember this, simplicity is not emptiness. It is mastery. It is the final stage of refinement, where every excess is cut away and only truth remains. Be brave enough to simplify your training, your mind, your life. Stop chasing applause. Stop collecting distractions. Stop hiding behind complexity. Instead, master the simple, the direct, the essential. Because when you do, you will not only build yourself into someone powerful, you will build yourself into someone unforgettable. And in a world drowning in noise, your simplicity will shine like a blade of pure steel, impossible to ignore. 12. Flow with life, but never drift aimlessly. Most people misunderstand the idea of flow. They think flowing with life means drifting, going wherever the current takes them, surrendering themselves to chance without purpose or direction. But that is not flow, that is weakness disguised as surrender. Real flow is powerful. It is the ability to move with life without being broken, to adapt to changes without losing yourself, to let challenges guide you into growth instead of resistance. I lived by this principle every day. I taught it, I embodied it, and I expressed it through martial arts, through philosophy, through the way I lived my life. To flow is to be alive, flexible, and unshakable at the same time. When I said, be water, my friend, people often thought I was only talking about softness. They imagined water as passive, as something that yields without fight. But water is not weak. Water is adaptable, yes, but it is also unstoppable. It can flow gently as a stream, nourishing life. It can strike with the force of a wave, breaking down walls. It can seep quietly through cracks, reshaping mountains over centuries. Water is patient, yet relentless. It never loses itself. It always remains water, no matter what form it takes. That is true flow. In life, you must learn to move as water moves, quietly, powerfully, endlessly. I saw this truth in every fight. A rigid fighter breaks because he refuses to adapt. He sticks to one form, one style, one plan, and when the opponent disrupts him, he collapses. But the fighter who flows, the one who can change instantly, who can adapt without hesitation, who does not cling to a single way, that fighter is unstoppable. That was my way. I refused to be trapped by style, by tradition, by rules that limited me. I flowed with what worked. I adapted to what was needed, and I became formless, unpredictable, alive. That is why I created Jeet Kune Do, not as a new style, but as the freedom to have no style, to move with life instead of against it. Flowing with life means you stop fighting the inevitable. Life will change, people will leave, plans will fail, storms will come. If you resist every change, you will break under the weight of disappointment. But if you flow, if you accept what comes and adapt, you become stronger with each change. When I was rejected by Hollywood, I did not stop. I flowed into teaching, into philosophy, into creating my own path. When I was injured, I did not collapse in despair. I flowed into study, into writing, into reflection. When life blocked one path, I found another. That is flow. It is not passive, it is active resilience. But flow does not mean drifting aimlessly. This is the mistake many make. They use the word flow to excuse laziness, to live without discipline, to justify a life with no direction. That is not flow, that is drift. Flow is purposeful. It is water moving toward the ocean no matter how many rocks stand in its way. It adapts, it bends, it finds cracks, but it never forgets where it is going. In your life, you must have that same clarity. Do not drift from goal to goal, distracted by every new wave. Instead, set your purpose like the ocean on the horizon and then flow toward it. Bend when necessary, adapt when obstacles appear, but never lose sight of where you are going. That is how flow becomes power. Flow also teaches humility. When you flow, you admit that you cannot control everything. You stop wasting energy trying to dominate the uncontrollable. You accept that life has seasons, that there will be times of growth and times of loss, times of movement and times of stillness. You stop fighting what you cannot change, and instead, you find a way to use it. This humility is not weakness, it is wisdom. It allows you to conserve your energy for what truly matters. Instead of being exhausted by fighting the river, you learn to ride it, to use its momentum, to turn its power into your advantage. But flowing with life requires inner strength. Without discipline, flow becomes drift. Without purpose, flow becomes surrender. This is why all the other lessons matter: discipline, solitude, simplicity, character. These are the roots that keep you grounded as you flow. Imagine a river. It flows freely, but it has banks that guide it. Without those banks, the water would scatter and become a swamp. Your discipline, your values, your clarity of purpose, these are the banks of your life. They give your flow direction. They keep your energy from scattering into nothingness. They ensure that your flow is not wasted, but powerful, concentrated, unstoppable. I practice this truth not only in combat, not only in philosophy, but in my daily living. When I trained, I did not cling to tradition for the sake of tradition. I flowed with what was useful, discarded what was not, and created what was uniquely my own. When I faced critics, I did not waste energy fighting them. I flowed past their noise, letting my results speak for me. When I pursued acting, I flowed through rejection, creating opportunities instead of waiting for permission. And when I faced pain, I flowed into it, letting it refine me instead of destroy me. That is the silent power of flow. It transforms obstacles into stepping stones, rejections into redirections, pain into strength. To live this way requires courage, because most people fear change. They cling to what is familiar, even if it is holding them back. But if you want to grow, you must let go. You must trust that by flowing forward, you will discover new strength, new opportunities, new depths of yourself. Think of bamboo. It bends in the wind, but it does not break. It flows with the storm, and when the storm is gone, it stands tall again. That is how you must live. Bend when life demands it, but never break. Adapt when circumstances shift, but never lose yourself. Flow around obstacles, but always move forward. And remember this, flow is silent. It does not need to announce itself. The river does not explain how it will reach the sea. It simply flows until it arrives. Do the same. Stop explaining every move to the world. Stop asking for approval at every step. Flow toward your purpose in silence and let your results speak. The world may not notice at first, but when they see the power of your persistence, the calmness of your adaptability, and the strength of your presence, they will realize that you were always moving forward quietly, purposefully, like water carving stone. So I leave you with this truth. Do not resist life and do not drift aimlessly. Flow with purpose, flow with clarity, flow with discipline. Let the currents shape you, but never control you. And when you live this way, you will discover that you are not only surviving, you are unstoppable. For just as water always finds its way to the ocean, you too will reach your destiny, no matter how many obstacles lie in your path. And when you do, the world will look back and see that your silent, steady flow was more powerful than all their noise. If you have listened closely, you will see that every lesson I shared with you has one thread running through it: silence. The world thinks power is in noise, in recognition, in applause. But the truth is, the deepest power, the most unshakable strength, and the kind of presence that cannot be ignored is always built in silence. I became Bruce Lee, not in the spotlight, not under cameras, not in the applause of the crowd, but in the quiet hours when nobody was watching. It was in the solitude of my training, in the discipline of my daily practice, in the humility of reflection, in the focus of protecting my energy, and in the patience of enduring storms that I forged myself. Silence is not weakness, it is the forge of mastery. When you train without applause, your movements sharpen until they are undeniable. When you build your mind before your muscles, your wisdom becomes a power that outlasts strength. When you protect your energy, you stop scattering your life into meaningless distractions and direct it toward what truly matters. When you let your results speak instead of your explanations, you prove what no words ever could. When you embrace solitude, you transform loneliness into strength. When you let your character be louder than your voice, you build a foundation that even time cannot destroy. When you become like water, you flow silently yet powerfully, shaping everything in your path. When you endure storms, you rise with calmness that others envy. When you conquer yourself, the world outside cannot touch you. When you live with purpose instead of approval, you free yourself from the prison of noise. When you master simplicity, you reveal truth. And when you learn to flow with life without drifting aimlessly, you become unstoppable. All of these lessons point to one truth. Greatness is not built in front of others. It is built within yourself. The world will only see the results later. The punches that broke barriers were trained in silence. The philosophies that inspired millions were written in solitude. The presence that commanded attention was shaped by years of quiet endurance. That is the way. You must learn to love the silence, because it is in the silence that you meet yourself, and once you master yourself, the noise of the world cannot shake you. Too many people waste their lives chasing recognition, trying to be noticed, trying to prove themselves to those who will never understand. But approval fades, applause dies, and recognition is fragile. If you live for those things, you will always be a slave to them. But if you live with discipline, with clarity, with authenticity, with purpose, if you live quietly and build yourself into someone unshakable, then the world will have no choice but to notice. Not because you asked them to, not because you begged for it, but because true power cannot be hidden forever. Just as light eventually pierces darkness, true greatness eventually shines, no matter how long it is built in silence. Remember this, you do not need to announce your path. You do not need to explain your vision. You do not need to chase approval. Build yourself quietly, train when no one is watching, grow your mind in solitude, protect your energy from the noise, simplify until only truth remains. Flow with life, but keep your direction. Conquer the enemy within before you chase victory outside. Live with purpose so strong that applause becomes irrelevant. And when the time comes, when the world finally sees what you have become, your presence will speak so loudly that no voice can silence it. I built myself quietly, and that is why I could not be ignored. You too can build yourself this way. Do not fear silence, embrace it. Do not run from solitude, use it. Do not chase recognition, outgrow it. Let your life become like water, silent, patient, persistent, unstoppable. And one day when you stand before the world, they will understand what you already knew, that the strongest force is not the one that shouts, but the one that grows in silence until it can no longer be denied. So walk your path quietly, work silently, endure patiently, flow powerfully, and build yourself into someone they cannot ignore. That is the way, that is the truth, that is the art of living fully,